And we're live. Great. So welcome everybody to this webinar. We have almost 50 people online right now and a lot more who registered for the event. And so we're going to give 1 minute to the latecomers. What do you say, speakers?
Hi, nice to see you.
Great. So we are going to walk through many topics today, and I am going to be the moderator of today's topic, Leading with Employee Data, a Guide to Strategic HR. And we are going to have this amazing panel of speakers, and we'll get to the introductions later. So we just give a couple more seconds to the latecomers to start.
Sounds good.
We're actually collecting data. Who has arrived early? Who has arrived late? Where are you arriving from?
That's great. That's awesome. Okay, without further ado, we have a lot of topics to cover. I'm going to start. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ling Kuei, and I am the Chief Brand Officer of Oneflow. Oneflow is a platform that helps HR teams to create, sign, and manage their contracts, such as employment contracts, offer letters, etc., all in one place. And it's an honor for me to welcome a wonderful, diverse panel of speakers to this webinar today. And before we dive in, a couple of housekeeping rules. You can always ask questions via the chat during the webinar. We encourage you to engage with us. And it will be approximately an hour long, and we're going to have a Q&A, an official one at the very end. But I want you to ask questions to our panels as we go. Ask difficult questions. And today's webinar will be recorded, of course, so you get all the recordings afterwards, and feel free to share it with your peers. And you might be wondering, why are we here today? So when you think about HR, what comes to your mind? Admin, culture, salary, spreadsheet, and really, HR tech has been around for years, and research has shown that HR tech adoption relative to our counterparts such as in sales and marketing is still very low. And I think it's about time for HR to take control of their employee data and drive decisions based on insights. Today's webinar is going to take us through the entire journey. Why is it important today? What is the status quo today? And what kind of metrics we should measure and how to measure them? At the very end, we're going to go through a use case, a real case study. So please stay with us and don't forget to ask questions. And now, we want to thank you again to join us and to our speakers. Would you want to give us a short intro of yourself? Anna.
Okay, so you want me to start. So yes, I'm Anna Carlsson. I'm an HR tech analyst in Sweden. I'm focusing on understanding everything what's going on in the HR area when it relates to tech and data. I use all this info to guide, inspire, and educate HR in utilizing more innovation, data, and tech in your work to become more people-focused. So use the data, use the insight, use the technology to be more close to your people with the right topics. I also do host a podcast and I do education sessions and things like that. So yes, that's me.
That's great. What's the name of your podcast?
HR Digitaliseringspodden. It's Swedish. Yes.
Amazing. Gotta check that out. Rami, what about you? Who are you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Don't ask me, Anna, to repeat the name of your podcast, please. My name is Rami Tzafrir. I'm part of HiBob. I lead the talent and learning. So basically a team that does talent management, learning and development, and is responsible for OD as well within the organization. I've actually been at the sort of intersection of data, people, and science for over 20 years now, focusing mostly on talent management, but also organizational effectiveness. And I've held both leadership and research roles in the academia, in the business, in very small business, and very large businesses. And I'm a continuous learner. I think that's maybe the most important thing to say.
That's awesome. I cannot wait to learn more from you, and I'm sure our audience feels the same way. Lisa.
Yes, hi. My name is Lisa Skinner, also based in Stockholm, and I lead the HR team at Team Tailor, and we are a Swedish-based company, founded about 10 years ago, and our product is a platform for applicant tracking, so an ATS, but also a good way to show off the employer brand. So my role is to manage the team on a global level. We're around 350 employees from Colombia to Singapore. And I've been in the HR industry since beginning of 2000. So it's been an amazing journey to follow what we talked about here, the evolution of HR. So that's my topic. Also a professional coach. So my topic is people, and I love this sort of connection to data as well, understanding how it can sort of help us make more informed decisions and work more strategically.
Amazing. And we are going to thank you so much for your introductions. And again, thank you so much for being with us. And we're going to talk a lot about the topics that around surrounding data today. And you might wondering, why data? Why now? So if we look back just a couple of years ago, when the pandemic started in 2022, a lot of a sudden tech companies are hiring a lot of people, and it was really cheap to raise money and to raise capital and hire. And so we have got a huge rise of people within organization. And now, as we know, with the inflation rates and interest rate rising, the wars and with the uncertainties that surround us, now companies are now starting to focus on efficiencies. And so with all the data that's available, we want to understand, okay, how can we now focus on scaling smartly using employee data? And before we start going to the data questions and why is it important today and what is the status quo, I want to ask the public, the audience today, what type of data do you collect and how are you using them? Would you want to write them in the chat, please? If we have anyone with us at all. And while we're waiting for people to start thinking about what kind of data they're collecting today, maybe we want to start with Rami. How important is this change, and how do you view the usage of data in driving decisions?
It's extremely important. I think we're all feeling it, even those of us who are not within HR. I think we feel it in our personal lives. I think I call it the data revolution has hit other industries and factors before us. Thank you, Teresia, for I see people starting to respond. I'm really interested to see what data is being collected. But I think I don't want to turn this into a history lesson, but I think it's extremely important for us to understand how this has impacted or hit other industries. So all of you probably in your companies have marketing departments. Marketing today and marketing 15 years ago is a completely different universe. Any of you who know it. So, social media, what you do in your business, what you do in your personal life, from big data from 2010 onwards, marketing has completely changed. The financial sector has completely changed. So understanding now, all the algorithms, the securities that we have, fraud detection, customer analytics, everything in finance has changed in the last couple of years. And I think COVID, as you mentioned correctly, COVID has really brought us to the forefront. COVID is when really things started changing completely. For HR is when we got a place at the table. It's when I remember at the time I was in a company, an 80,000 plus employee company, and COVID was scary for us. It was scary because our business continuity plan wasn't prepared for it. Our understanding of where our workforce was, the urgency, sort of the burning platform that we talked about in change. We were all on the burning platform immediately from day one. And everyone was looking to HR to provide them with the answers, right? Where are our people? What's our succession plan? how does remote work happen? I mean, even basic things that nowadays seems to us, if I were to offer, I'm hiring at the moment, by the way, in a couple of locations. But if I were to tell someone you need to be 5 days in the office, they wouldn't even show up for the interview, at least for our company. At the time, we didn't even know how to deal with it. What do you mean work from anywhere? What does work from anywhere mean? So I think and there's tons of questions and ways of how HR stepped in, understanding the data and tried to change it. But it was initially it started very technical. I see some of you, the data that you're collecting, some of it was very technical, right? It was, how many hours are you working? Managers who were concerned that if they can't see you, you're not working, right? It sounds funny now. But it moved from how many hours do you work? Are you really productive? What's the effectiveness of what it is that you're doing? There were horror stories. I was in part of Insight 222 at the time, David Green think tank. There were offices that were actually tapping into your webcam and checking whether people were actually working when they said they would be working. So it's moving from understanding that to understanding really how do you do workforce planning, how are people engaged, well-being and mental health are topics that I could talk to about for hours. But that's really, I think, where we really stepped into the game and showed that we were not just a service provider, but we were really strategic partners, and that the data we brought to the table was really how processes had to change and how decisions had to be made. And thank you, all of you, for sharing. I'm seeing a lot of very interesting data on chat.
100%. Thank you so much, Rami. That's really interesting. And we can also see lots of the similar data that we're collecting. And Anna, I want to throw the questions to you too. And you've done the research within the Nordic companies on the types of data we're collecting and how good are we. And the result is not as favorable as we thought it would be. Can you elaborate a little bit about the status quo of data collection within the HR in the Nordics?
So yes, so I'm not doing the study myself. It's referring to a global study called CRANET, which is the Swedish part of it is done by the Center of Global Human Resource in Gothenburg. So it's a global study. And it's very interesting because we think in Sweden and also in the Nordics that we are ahead of the game, that we are good at digitalization and analytics. But when you dig into the details, we are not. So specifically in Sweden, we are quite lousy at utilizing data. Only 10% of organizations are using it to a large or at least using the data for doing things with it. And I don't know exactly where everyone is, but I see also in the responses on the more traditional data points that this is the same for you who are here. So, and why is this? So why does it look like it does in the Nordics? So Sweden has then 10% utilizing the data. Denmark a bit better, 21%. But if you compare it to, for example, to Switzerland, it's like 56% there. So it's quite a big difference. And it all relates to that we have quite a common look of our HR teams. So if you look inside, or if you go to an HR seminar, everyone knows you see the same age, the same gender, the same look and feel of the people. And especially in Sweden, we also have the same educational background. So we come from behavioral science backgrounds. We go to the same school, really. It's not the same in Denmark, so maybe that's why it's different. Because we all know that if we want to do new things, innovative things, utilizing the gold nuggets of data, you have to challenge your thinking. And if all of the teams come from the same background, and that's not the platform for innovation. Platform for innovation is the differences between people. There is also another thing. It's how we do the HR work. we give a lot of the responsibility to the managers. And that's an historical thing. And if you have the managers being responsible for the HR tasks, like the recruitment, like performance, like everything else, and they don't have the task of innovating that activity, so they kind of stay in the same way. So so there are a lot of different things making this us being a bit behind, and I think that's a big potential for everyone.
That's awesome. So what we need to see more is definitely more diversity and more responsibility of the HR tasks being passed around to all levels of people. Lisa, what do you think? Like, we really want to change the HR perspective of being viewed as, this support function, administrative to very strategic, being the catalyst of strategic decision driving, the people growth, how we move forward and stuff. How do you see any challenges of just getting there? What is your view on that?
Yes. No, but I hear what you're saying, Anna, as well there. And I've listened to your podcast as well, talking about sort of these studies and so on, which is so interesting. And I think even though we are not sort of where we want to be and where other countries are, I think also sort of looking back myself, I mean, I started in the beginning of 2000, and I specifically remember around like 2006, 2007, I was working for this big global company, and where we had, it was quite interesting because the HR sort of services had been outsourced to a shared service center, and now the decision was to bring everything back in-house. And that was sort of all of the managers and so on had not had a really good experience with this shared service setup. So coming in at that point, I remember HR where we were really struggling to sort of show the value, because during the sort of dissatisfaction, all of the managers, a lot of them had taken on the work themselves nearly, because they didn't have the HR support. So when I think back, that was quite clear that we had to work so hard just to sort of prove that we were supposed to be there, that we were making a difference, and so on. And that is a change that I do see. And keeping in mind, I mean, we have a lot of different guests here. We might be working in a lot of different industries and have a lot of different sort of backgrounds and so on. I myself, I've been sort of in the tech industry the last 5 to 6 years. So I think it might differ as well between industries. But again, my experience is that even though we've come from something which has been very administrative, I see a big change in the way that HR is viewed, and the actions that we are taking and so on. But with that said, I also remember around that time, sort of 2007, 2008, we were talking about sort of attrition as a KPI. But I see that the difference as well from back then, it was more like just a number, something we were talking about, and it was like, whoa, this is high or this is low. But what we have sort of developed is putting it more into context, I think, as well, and understanding, okay, what are the different parameters, even though if it's high, what does that mean? And what are the benchmarks and so on? So I see that we are talking more about sort of data in a bit more context than we were. It was nice to talk about it back then, but I do see a sort of shift in that, although again, saying that we could do even more. So I think that this change is something that definitely is sort of helping HR to have a more sort of natural seat at the table, and again, being the more strategic partner.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lisa. Just reading through all the different types of data that we're collecting today, traditional data, employee happiness, commitment survey, salary, employer branding, and all this type of data. How are we're going to go to the next, which is very cool, because the next topic we're going to talk about is really about thinking about metrics that matter. There's so many data to collect out there. How do we think about which one is the most important, which one are just, vanity metrics, as we will call it? So I want to start by talking to you, Rami. What do you feel? How do you feel about how should people think about what kind of metrics they should be collecting from the beginning, and if there's any difference between, understanding the reports or analyzing to get the different types of insights?
Yeah, I think reporting and analytics are two very different things. I'm sure Anna from her website, from her podcast, can probably share a lot more information about how she sees it there. I can only say from a practitioner perspective, this is what I enjoy doing, which is the analytics side, so really understanding the data. I see reporting, and I know you have three experts on the call here. We probably have 6 different definitions for this. But I see it in a very basic way. I see the reporting as being something that's foundational and descriptive, right? It can be very misleading because a lot of companies use it. So I love the examples I always see of diversity, right? We have, 50% of our workforce are females, but then when you go into the analytics, when you go deeper, when you actually try and understand it, you see that the C-level has one woman out of 10 people in the C-level team, for example. So I think the analytics is really understanding the descriptive aspect of the data, really getting those insights, being able to do something that's maybe predictive. So it's not just looking back and understanding, okay, this is what we've had this far, is what will happen 6 months from now. Let us plan different scenarios and prepare for, workforce planning is a perfect example. We always go into workforce planning is not just understanding the history or understanding the reporting that we have. It's deciding, 5 years from now, I need 2 data scientists. Where should I hire them? Should I hire them in Amsterdam? And what would the pay be in 2 years from now in Amsterdam? What would the pay be? What would the talent scarcity be in Brussels or in Madrid or in Barcelona? And where should I hire those people? So those are decisions that businesses are doing based on the data that's predictive, not just looking back as to what has worked. And you're not going to hire where you have people. You're going to hire where it makes sense to have those people 5 years from now, as an example. But DIB is a great example. I always like to dig deeper and really understand, what does it mean? How many leadership roles do we have for females? How is that transition from individual contributor to manager? How can we help certain populations make that transition? That the reporting itself won't provide you that detail. It will just show you the numbers of it. Employee satisfaction, I see a lot of you mentioning ENPS. That's a great one. Companies love to flaunt their ENPS score. What does it really mean? Go in deeper and understand it. Where is it high? Where is it low? Why is it low? How has it changed? So all those are analytic type of questions and not necessarily just the reporting.
Anna, do you have any other additional input to that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to mention that every organization is different. So what type of data to collect and what KPIs to measure is based on what challenge you need to solve. So it's always the strategic focus, and don't limit yourself in thinking this is what data I have, because then you have to think instead, okay, so this is our challenge. What data points would we need to be able to find the underlying problem in this? But just coming back to the different levels of analytics, we talk about the reporting. Reporting is something that already happened. So that's reporting, telling someone, and then they make the interpretation, usually by themselves. And then you can walk into analytics, and then you have used the specific models, so people models, to understand what's really the understanding of this data, not only presenting the data, but understanding it really. Because it's like when you look at salary data and comparing your salaries in your organization, you just don't look at the salary levels. You have all the considerations of ages, what type of job roles, how did they come to the company, what's their education level, how many years in a row. So that's when you really compare salaries to each other, is my salary affair versus my colleagues. So you need to really be good at the statistical models and see the causalization between the data points. So that's the analytics. And then you come to the predictive models, which can be very helpful, which the advanced organizations use. So you can make scenarios. So if we change this, what happens in the future? And that's the predictive models. And on top of that, we have to think about that data is the basis for artificial intelligence. So I would say that the highest level of analytics is really AI, because then you can also act on the different data points.
Thank you so much, Rami and Anna. So Lisa, what are the top KPIs that people should be measuring? And also we have a question from our audience. If we can give some perspective in regards to, small business in the growth journey versus the larger, more established companies.
I just have to echo what you said, Anna, as well, and Rami, because of course, I mean, there might be things that everyone should look at, but most importantly, to understand your business and why do we need to look at it. So I just want to mention that before. And I think as well, sort of echoing that as well, that it's something where we talked about sort of the evolution and so on of HR, that it's important that it's not HR saying like, okay, this is our own little box. This is something that we want to measure because now we know that we need to start to work with data. Again, it always needs to be connected to the business and why and how and so on. So I just want to make that sort of statement as well. But if we do come into the KPIs that I think we should measure, it's definitely looking at something like attrition, which is something that we saw in the chat here, something that a lot of teams are looking at. But not only looking at the attrition and saying, this is the score or this is the percentage, but also attrition can tell you so much when you put it together with a lot of other sort of metrics and sources of information. But I think that's something that is good to look at, absolutely. And then other to sort of combine that as well, looking at some type of engagement score. I saw also here looking at sort of either EMPS or any other type of measurement to understand sort of the happiness of the teams. Again, that can also be compared and put together with other metrics, but that will also help you understand different sort of initiatives that you're working on. If you're adding, for example, like new benefits or launching new programs, to also see how that sort of fluctuates during time. But then also you talked about sort of wellness, I think, in the beginning as well, Rami, trying to be proactive, looking at sort of proactive scores like long-term, short-term sickness, for example, and understanding what does this data tell us? How can we prevent things from happening in the future? So those are our sort of three: attrition, some type of engagement score, but also sort of wellness and sickness, to make sure that you're taking the right actions and so on to move forward. I don't think there's a magic solution to say like, right, if you do these three, you cover everything. It needs to be adapted to the business. But at least this is something that, in my experience, I think it's important.
Lynn, can I respond to Johanna's question, just the larger organization versus the smaller that you mentioned? And I think that one of the things that you can think about is that when you utilize different solutions, today we have, for example, HiBob here, you get the collected knowledge from all other companies. So if you don't have that much data in your own organization, you can get insights when you combine your own data with kind of both data or common, aggregated data.
That's great. I hope that. Rami, do you want to?
I'm just gonna jump in there and say, I think what's exciting nowadays is in the past you had to have a very clear hypothesis, right? You couldn't do any analysis, so people were always told, don't just collect data for the sake of collecting it. Why are you collecting it? How do you use it? Some of the new methods, though, that we've been experimenting with are like cluster analysis and so forth. The exciting thing is you can dump everything. You can collect everything into this huge data lake and see maybe there are connections between, parameters or criteria that you didn't even consider had impact, right? So you're saying about, collecting sick leave data. That's interesting, but what's more interesting is absenteeism. When people maybe feel they need to take a sick leave because of other things. They're not making themselves sick. They're not lying. They really feel physically sick, but it's absenteeism and not what we would refer to as a regular known and diagnosed sickness. How do you understand that? What's impacting it? So this sort of new methods of cluster analysis and so forth are interesting because there might be parameters that you didn't even consider, right, in the past, and now are showing up as interesting. So don't trust everything that has AI and ML on it, because everyone now, it's the flavor of the month. Everyone says they're using machine learning and AI, but at least know that there's a lot of new methods and a lot of interesting frameworks. Wherever it is, even if you're a very small company, start collecting that data. Or if you have, HiBob or other platforms that have all of those demographics, what's the connection between shoe size and absenteeism? Maybe there is, on our, in a platform where you have those two lines of data, you might see eventually that there is connection. So very, very exciting.
It's never too late to start collecting data. And I think we already touched a bit about this in our recent conversation that, how do you use data to create an impact or make certain actions and decisions. And I want to jump into our next topic, which is to really understand how do we get the most out of our data. And Rami, I'm going to start with you again. With priority on talent, skills, and retention, what role does data play in that areas?
Yeah. First of all, I see there's a question on GDPR. I want to be sure that we answer it. I think it's a very important question. We will get back to it. Yes. So if I understood your question, then you were asking about skills and how does that impact, or what aspects of data. I think skills is one of the most interesting topics that we have. I think it's really going to revolutionize our entire employee life cycle. So we're using it. We're looking at skills now, sort of the building blocks of understanding talent. So it basically, any of you, if I were to ask you after this session to open your job description, read through it, and see how much of what's on it is really something that you do in your day in, day out. I think there'll be a lot of surprises, right? So we did that sort of experiment, right? We went through our entire job description list and try and figure out what the skills were, and then spoke to our leaders and try and understood what the skills are that they really need. And we saw, obviously, that there were some euphemism blind spots. So we want to understand really what the task is that someone is hired for. How do you hire for that role? What the skills are that are required. We want to understand what skills will be required. This is, I kept mentioning this because I heard this research 3 weeks ago, and it's top of mind still. A LinkedIn research that, any role that we're looking at 6 years back, 25% of the skills were different. The prediction is that 6 years forward, 65% of the skills will be different. So it's everyone's role and everyone's skills will need to change. This is a real emergency. So we want to understand it. We want to understand who we hire, how do we develop people, who do we promote, how do we have performance conversations. So anything that impacts the life cycle of an employee can be looked at through the skills. It's what features do we develop for our product even, right? So I think it's just one example, but I think it's a very critical example. AI, obviously, the skill taxonomy exercise that I spoke about, it took us 5 months, I think. And by the time we completed it, it felt like it's not relevant because it's old news. So we're looking at AI tools that can actually, I don't need to talk to my leaders. I can scan the entire industry market and see what the skills are, what the new skills are, what the emerging skills are, and so forth. So again, very, very exciting field.
100%. And with the pace of technology going forward, I believe like we're really heading into the unknown. Everybody has to adapt. Lisa, do you have any real examples of how you use data to influence your HR strategies and initiatives?
No, but definitely. And I think so many different factors to look at. But one thing that I do remember is us in another company establishing our business in a new region. So it was not with our own people data, but when we started doing sort of research on that new location and understanding more about sort of demographics and salary levels, and then matching that against sort of our plan and our strategy, how we wanted to grow, what type of profiles we were thinking to hire, and so on in that region. That was actually something that made us change our minds. Because we saw that, okay, we think that this is maybe a low-cost location where we will be easy to hire and so on, but ended up realizing that this was actually not the case. So that is an example in sort of a strategic way looking forward. But I think also I'm trying to use a lot of what I mentioned before as well when we're doing sort of new initiatives to always look at how it's received. Because again, I think it's quite easy that as a management team or as an HR team, there's so many things that we think is right for the business, and we think that it's something that people want. One way is, of course, to ask for feedback in advance, but also try to be sort of very quick in understanding, okay, is this something that the business really wants? Is this what our teams need at this point? So working with that type of I guess, feedback or analyzing responses and so on, and then adapting, because that's what I think is so important as well. And as you mentioned, Rami, with the pace of everything that is moving at the moment, even though that there is a plan or a strategy, if the data tells you differently, there is the option to change in many cases. So yeah, a few examples.
Just unmute myself. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I'm going to go back to Anna and Rami. Have you been working with different type of data sets, and how did we gain those data? Is there a specific methods that you use to gain the different data? So
so it all depends on what kind of data you need to collect. So then back to what challenges you are looking for. If it's to establish an office somewhere, you need to know what kind of people you have on board, what kind of people you need then to do that. And I mean, the thing I want to say is that don't overdo it. Be sure to gather data where it feels kind of normal to share this data. So it has to be part of a process. You can't. The worst thing is to try to get everyone to fill in a lot of details. So if you instead can utilize, for example, AI or other tools to gather data, do that. Because it's in many cases when you start your digitalization journey, you end up changing the behavior of people, how they do their work, and it's the change process and doing that as smooth as possible, and looking at how is the activity going to be perceived by the employee or the manager. So you have to make it smooth and easy. And it's no real kind of, it's no way you can say to people, this is how you do it. It's more, okay, so it's a normal process starting to utilize digital tools. You start to report and answer questions maybe, and you have your engagement surveys, you fill in your data to answer questions while you do an education. I mean, you can do many different things, but it also has to feel that you get a value back as an employee. So be sensitive and take it step by step, and don't overdo it.
great. Thank you so much, Anna. And we're going to jump into the next question. I think it's also relevant to what the audience are now thinking about. There has been challenges, of course, when you want to become a more data-driven, more proactive HR department. And so we want to know more about the main challenges that you face. And while we wait for the chat coming in from our audience, maybe we can talk a bit about the GDPR data, and that how ethical is it, or how do we deal with collecting personal data? Does anybody want to talk about that?
I can start. So there is,
Go ahead, Anna.
It's regulations, and you have to know that whatever you collect has to be something that you need for your business, and you have to state that, and it's the same for everyone, and you need to follow the process of deleting it and so on, and managing it. But one thing about GDPR and regulating data is that I see that many HR organizations are being too narrow. They don't think they can expand what they gather. So it's kind of limiting the ability rather than opening up. So be more creative, and make sure that you are, then that you don't cross any boundaries, but still don't think you can't do anything until you have checked it out properly. Lisa is now nodding.
And I'll let you go first, Rami.
No, I completely agree. I think, and we always work with, we have legal counsels, right, that help us really understand, because even the GDPR keeps changing, the regulation keeps changing all the time. Even when I think I know it well, suddenly there's something new. I think what matters to me as a practitioner at the end of the day is remember that you're using the data for the power of good. And that should be what really matters. That's the essence of what this is for. And that's why I never find it frustrating, because I understand that why it's there. And I can definitely understand that certain organizations might lose their way if there isn't sort of this guardrails to help protect employees. But sometimes you're surprised. I was working, we did this capacity study, which was really interesting. We thought the work councils in certain countries were going to object. They actually wanted to see the data because they thought it could help them support their case for showing, people maybe are working during weekends or are working overtime or are working. So don't make assumptions in what different employees or what benefits the data might end up having, because you'd be surprised sometimes. I think what Anna mentioned about over surveying, I think survey fatigue doesn't happen because people are completing a lot of surveys. It's because they're not seeing the impact of it, or there's no feedback for it. So I think GDPR is also there to help them understand that this is for their benefit. We really want to understand. We're not collecting ENPS just to have it as a number. We want to understand not just how can we make you happy, how can we change your overall employee experience in this company?
No, happy to just add to that as well, with sort of being transparent on why you collect data and how you're going to use it, but also setting the expectations on how we will feedback and share our findings. I think that's a big responsibility as a business. And then, of course, too, what you said, Anna, as well, make sure that it's compliant and treated with confidentiality and who will access and so on. But definitely setting expectations on how you will use it, because otherwise people will not want to add anymore, I guess.
And I saw that one of the comments was just around that, a lot of challenging within change management when the management team don't have the same mind of proactive HR. Yes, that's a big challenge, because it all ends up with the management team, what the management sets as expectations in an organization and sets as the culture. And everything can be used for good or bad, but if you are an organization using things for good, then it's easier. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And the next topic really is super relevant in the sense that change management, connection to the business. And Rami, business is something that we have in common. While all the data are super different depending on which department you are. How do you make that connection to the business so that we can also manage this expectation from the other parts of the organization to be in the same mindset as we want to be?
Yeah. Good question. And I see also in the chat people have asked, have you becoming a data-driven organization? Definitely yes, right? I think we all feel that we're sort of overworked, overloaded, have no time to do anything else. Suddenly coming in with this idea of, this is how I'm going to add work. That's how people see it. Or this is how I'm going to impose on your privacy and ask you all of these different questions and information. You need to show that there's a return on that investment. So you need to show that there's value or the purpose of why you're doing it. You're not doing it just because you're interested in the science and the numbers. You're doing it to improve people's experience, to improve the bottom line of the business at the end of the day. I remember that I did it was almost a 6-month research study with our entire Salesforce data in the previous company and all of our learning management system data to show the efficacy and impact of our new sales onboarding program. And we ended up after a couple of months with a very beautiful graph showing you that the more training you participate in, the less you sell. So it's obviously there's a story behind it, right? We understood that we were only looking at 2 years back of data, and some of the more experienced salespeople have done the trainings before what we were looking at, or were trained somewhere else, and they were a buy versus a build, and there was this whole narrative and story around it. But so it wasn't a failure. It was an opening. It was an insight. It was opening into us understanding more how we use the data and not making any blind assumptions, which is just more training is better, but really understanding what was impactful. And I think that those type of experiences, showing, hybrid. Of course, everyone worked extremely well when we went into hybrid because those were teams that actually knew each other and then could work virtually. But what happens when you onboard a team that has never met each other and you need to get approval for a 1-week face-to-face suddenly, which is extremely expensive. So that, Michael Arena did a lot of very interesting, really looking at fMRI data. So really how people chemically interact if they've spent time together face-to-face before or only on Zoom. So there's a lot of very interesting data that can help you build the case for, getting more investment, for getting, bigger people analytics team and so forth. But you need to start somewhere. So, yeah.
All right, Lisa, is there any ROI on data? And I'm going to ask you guys to be very short in your question because we're really running out of time. I would like to leave some time for our Q&A as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think, we've touched upon this already, I think, being close to the business and so on, but making sure that that the data you collect and how you present it, that will also help sort of building the strategic function of HR. So, if you have initiatives, of course, that you want to do, use whatever data you have. It doesn't need to be big and complicated and fancy, but connect what you want to do, show the results. It can be either sort of monetary, that you would, make savings when you do this investment, or just making other changes in terms of initiatives in well-being and so on. But always try to connect, of course, the data to the results that you want to see. And start small and not make it too complicated. Try to find those sort of easy wins that you can use.
The low-hanging fruits. Anna, do you have any case studies that you want to share quickly to the audience before we end the webinar?
Yes, sure. So it was interesting what Lisa talked about, establishing offices, which was one of the cases I had as well, because I had the opportunity to meet with Katarina at Spotify a few times. And she always talks about this, how they utilize, they use data all the time. They are a data company, but they really use it. So she is instrumental in deciding where they open their new offices when they enter a new market. It's a combination of the internal data with other data externally to establish their offices. But the most interesting, I would say, that really probably relates to everyone listening is that I met with an old HR business partner friend and talked about data. So they gather a lot of data. It's performance rating, salary data, skills and knowledge, and the career development, and so on. And but as you know, here comes this manager who comes in and said, this person needs to get a higher salary now, otherwise I will lose this person. And the HR business partner says, so let's look into the platform. And, then you can see that, yeah, you didn't give that person such a good performance rating last year. You haven't evaluated the skills as being very key to the market. So you had a view already where you could see that this person, it wasn't really the person you would give a higher salary. So then you can kind of penetrate the issue with the manager not really wanting to lose a person because it makes a problem for him in his organization. So it's a personal thing that, oh, God, what a problem. I don't have time to recruit a new person. So then you can save money for the business because otherwise you would pay the wrong person for something that you don't need. So that's an interesting case.
Very interesting indeed, and something that we can all relate to, being in the business for a long time. Before we end our webinar to go into the Q&A, so really quickly, 2 key takeaways from each and every one of you. We're going to start with Anna.
Okay, yes. So one of the things is to collaborate internally, because to learn about data and be able to utilize the data, then you have people around you who probably knows this better than you if you're starting now as an HR person. So learn from each other and work together around the data, because they have been working on data for a lot longer than you do. And then I want to go to that you should let go of your data perfectionism. So you should make sure that people use the system where you collect the data, so you don't do it manually, because then you have a big problem. But no people data is perfect, because people are people. So you have to look at it in a different way. So just let go of your perfectionism.
Anna. Oh, no, sorry, Lisa. I'm going crazy.
Maybe to add on to that perfectionism part there, again, I think somewhere starting small and simple. Don't make it too big to yourself. If you want to start working with data, try to understand a few small topics that you can work on, and then grow from there. Don't build a huge, big dashboard with a lot of different sources. That will just be complicated. So start small and simple. And then something we've also touched on, I think, to really align with your stakeholders. What type of data do we need to see as a business? Don't create your own sort of agenda for HR and work with that. Make sure it's relevant and that it moves you forward.
Super cool. And Rami, before you tell us your key takeaway, I just want to remind you that we still have 78 people in this webinar watching live, which is really amazing. So Rami, take it away. 2 key takeaways from you.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is become a storyteller. I think it's not the numbers, but it's really how you know when you speak to, if you speak to employees, make it clear what's behind the numbers and why is it important. When you talk to executives as well, it's this. Remember, it's the story. It's translating the numbers into what it means for them, and not just showing them the graphs. That will not suffice. And a second thing, which is a bit sort of maybe high level, but it's continuous learning mindset. I think that's extremely important. We don't have data set skills in HR as a rule. We should have it, but it's also about continuously learning and combining different knowledge that you have into understanding the numbers.
Very good. Now the next question is, how do you become a storyteller? Yep.
It's a skill set, right? Like any skill set, it can be learned. So we have a lot. I'm answering. Maybe it was a funny question, but I'm answering it seriously. We work a lot with. We have LinkedIn Learning, and we have our own internal content, and we have internal trainers. So we have people from our marketing department that it's a passion of theirs, and they're extremely talented at it, and they teach others. We really believe within HiBob, we believe in bobbers teaching bobbers. So we have people internally who are mentors, people who are facilitators of content. But it's something that you need to keep practicing and working on. For some of our leaders, what we've done is they have their own storybooks. So they collect stories. They understand what it is that they want to transfer, what the idea it is that they want to transfer, and we help them build and create those stories. So we need a webinar just for this one specific topic, but it's interesting.
Amazing. That will be our next webinar, Rami. And now to the questions from the audience. We still have about 100 people online, so I'm pretty sure you have some questions that we can fill our last 5 minutes with. One of the questions that we've got during the presentation was that, Anna, you mentioned a study that, and someone was curious about where is this study come from and what is it called?
Oh, it's called CraneNet. Let me put that. CraneNet. I don't have the link to it right now. So it's managed through the different universities in the different countries. But I do have some data. Let's see if I find it and I can post it.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions? Just scrolling through our chat right now and see if there's anything that we did not answer. There's a comment from Daniel. I believe a challenge that can be data is set and measurement is not translated through the leaders. How do you feel about leadership? What kind of roles do they play in translating the data to the business?
I think that connects a lot.
I believe that unless data is made public and democratized, it won't have an impact. So, for example, on our surveys, any manager who is eligible for the survey, so any manager who has more than 3 responders in their groups will get directly the data. I don't want to be the one, or I don't want their VP to be the one that needs to explain the data to them or make it available to them. They have direct access to the data, which is powerful, but it puts the onus on them as well to act upon it. So I think leaders it's a critical link in this chain.
I saw another question. I was just thinking about it was a question about connection of salary, different types of data, which is not HR data. And I just want to say that you need to go outside of your HR solutions to work on this data. And there is also a process there are different type of providers. You usually have a data analytics tool in your organization for the general business, but there are also specialized people data platforms nowadays that can assist you working on your people data questions that includes data across all of your business and not only the HR data.
Like HiBob.
Okay.
Do you collect every data? I didn't know that. You can gather data from other places as well then.
We can have various sources, yes. So we can add specific.
Sorry, I didn't know that. Learn something.
Well, it has to be defined, right? I think so. Yeah. The admin of the platform can do that, and we have suggestions. So, for example, if you're looking at retention, it will show you the insights from it. Obviously, there's so many different sources of data. We haven't even spoken about active and passive data and how do you collect it, but. Any sort of platform or source that can help you combine and look at it would be a great place to start.
Lots of data and a lot of understanding and analysis to do from us humans. AI can help us lots of stuff, but still, we humans, we need to analyze and understand those data and tell the story as well. So I want to thank you guys, the panels of speakers that we have today, Lisa, Rami, and Anna. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and lessons learned from your experience to the audience. And thank you so much to everyone who has been online since 11, and it's been an hour later. I still see people around, hanging around. So thank you so much. We'll share the recording with you guys, everyone, and hope to see you in our next webinar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.